Hello and welcome. My name is Jeremy Kent. This module is on high-risk plays, so let's get into it. In this module, we'll detail high-risk plays and dive deep into different offensive schemes. But first, I'd like to talk about how we got to the modern game of football, because to understand SRCs in the modern game, it helps to have insight into what football evolved from. There are many tidbits on the historical origins of the game, so I'm going to cherry pick a little. But football history sets the stage for the modern game that's played today and why we evolved from the devastating flying wedge to our current pass-happy offenses. Rutgers is proud of holding the very first official football game on November 6, 1869. The game was more like a brawl with a ball. Football took its origins from soccer and rugby. The ball was round like a soccer ball. There were no helmets or pads. The original rules were completely different, where carrying or throwing a ball was actually against the rules. Teams scored through a goal by either kicking, batting the ball with their hands, feet, or whatever else body part they could come in contact with before it was ripped off by an opposing player. And yeah, there were 25 players to a side. It was a chaotic, violent melee with a little scoring mixed in. Eventually, rules were modified that allowed handoffs and running. As you can imagine, the soccer-style ball was difficult to handle, and the ball was eventually modified to an oblong shape, similar to the rugby ball, that was easier to hold, and opened the way for the great running backs in that early era. The running game also produced one of the first tactics in football called the flying wedge. The flying wedge was an effective running play to advance the ball. The linemen would link arms and advance in a wedge shape. The running back planted themselves in the middle of the wedge and they all moved in unison. This was a successful but also dangerous play and led to some deaths from severe head trauma. Football became so treacherous that President Roosevelt allegedly became involved and almost shut the game down. They outlawed the flying wedge and football survived along with many a young man's brain cells. But it's interesting to note that concussions and football have been linked from the beginning. It's also important to remember that rules changes to make the game safer do not diminish the game, but historically have made it stronger. So, with the flying wedge outlawed and the running game stalled, the passing game appeared. The football was also modified to a form more in line to the modern ball of today. That ball and the change in tactics to a passing game produced the exciting product that's on the field today. Unfortunately, concussions never left the game. Instead of the flying wedge, SRCs manifest in other plays. Research shows that different plays have a higher incidence of concussions. Keeping it simple, there are 4 types of plays in football. These plays are in order of greatest risk for concussions. It's not a surprise that special teams plays are the highest risk. Kickoff is 3 times higher risk for concussion than any other play. Punting is slightly higher than a passing play, and a passing play is at greater risk than a running play. While special teams has unique positions on the football field, in this module and course, we are categorizing special teams as a play instead of individual positions. This coincides with how they are grouped, such as the return unit or the punting unit. With that said, the kick returner has the highest exposure risk of any position. Take a look at this special teams play and see if you can spot the concussion.
Sanders trying to get to the outside, still on his feet, goes down at the 45, barely tripped up. A 30-yard return after a 50-yard
that they have been so excited about since camp. Sanders, a guy who broke long run after long run during fall camp, and Brian Kelly said, we're just looking forward to.
The kicking unit player was sideswiped helmet to helmet, and then it appears he has a second hit of helmet to ground. Take another look at the video. The kicking unit player was sideswiped helmet to helmet, and then it appeared he had a second hit of helmet to ground.
Sanders trying to get to the outside, still on his feet, goes down at the 45, barely tripped up. A 30-yard return after a 50-yard
that they have been so excited about since camp. Sanders, a guy who broke long run after long run during fall camp, and Brian Kelly said, we're just looking forward to.
During special teams play, the kick returner is a position at greatest risk for a concussion. And, depending on the metrics used to calculate concussion risk, the kick returner has the greatest risk compared to all positions on the football field. The kicking unit is the position at next greatest risk during a special teams play. This does not include the kicker who, unsurprisingly, is at a much lower risk. Here is another special teams play. See if you can find the concussion. Here is the video one more time. Follow the kick returner. He sustains a high intensity impact and is slow to get up. The next slide is another special teams video. This would be difficult to spot in real time. The end zone angle makes it a little easier to catch it.
Returns the kickoff for
The returning unit player impacts the kick returner and then has his helmet hit off by his own teammate. He also has his hand on his head after the play. Watch the play again.
returns the kickoff for
This is the final special teams video. It's a difficult one to spot. The player on the return unit initiated a firm but otherwise innocuous block, but then had an unusual reaction in player Q. He was holding the side of his head and moving sideways. You want to watch this one again. So let's now transition from special teams to different offensive plays. What about specific offensive schemes? Do different offensive playbooks confer more risk to the player? Let's look into it. Research suggests that a West Coast style passing offense is at greater risk for concussions than a vertical offense like the Air Coryell offense. The West Coast offense employs short, horizontal passes with a greater emphasis on passing than running. This creates two higher risk situations. Passing plays are inherently high risk for concussions, and the wide receiver is closer to the line of scrimmage and catches the ball in higher trafficked areas, which enables more defensive players to take part in the play, leading to a concussion. The Air Coryell offense puts a greater emphasis on passing, but employs deeper vertical passing plays that lead to more single coverage in less traffic. In theory, the West Coast offense was created for a less talented team, a team with less explosive players. The Air Coryell offense was intended for fast wide receivers and talented quarterbacks who could throw the deep ball. Because of this theoretical talent gap, it's also possible that the more talented players in the Air Coryell type offense, who are bigger, faster, stronger, are conferred less of a risk for concussion based on their inherent talent. This, though, is based more on speculation than evidence, so I'll leave it up to you to decide, or maybe answer in future research. There are many other offensive schemes, such as the ones listed. Some are variations of others. Unfortunately, there is no data on these as yet. However, the principles remain that a passing dominant scheme that passes into traffic has a higher risk of a concussion compared to a vertical passing game or a run-dominant offense. In summary, evidence has shown that there are high-risk plays and offensive schemes that you should be mindful of when looking for concussions. In the future modules, we'll merge much of the data so far presented and make a little more sense out of the various details of in-game concussions. Be aware that intermediate passing plays and ball control offense begins to paint a picture of concussions on the field of play. Knowledge of these details can help you potentially identify concussions sooner. This concludes this module. Please click on the header bar to either proceed to the next module or return to the main page.